Hello everyone, I recently followed a tutorial to make this prop. The goal for me was to practice texturing on Substance Painter, and I thought about making a video on how to properly light your models. Before we start, it is important to have your object respect the actual physical scale, because it will impact the materials on your object, and not only that, it will impact the power you're going to use for your lighting, and it's also going to impact things like depth of field. And to do that, it's simple. You just add a cube, you move it up while holding control, and then you can scale it. So now if we see, this is 2 meters tall. It's roughly the size of a human, and you can see our phone is roughly within the size of a real candlestick phone. We will be tackling mainly two methods. The first one you probably heard of is the classic 3-point lighting. The angles and positions of your light depend obviously on the position of your camera. So this is my camera. We obviously have the main key light, the rim light, and the fill light. I will explain briefly the goal of each light. We'll start off by turning off all the lights. The goal of the key light is to act as the main source of light in your scene. It's usually the brightest of the three, and the only thing you need to make sure is that the shadows that it casts are not hard, so they need to stay soft shadows. So if you make the source smaller, you notice that the shadows get harder. That's just the only thing you need to. As for the color of this light, you can make it a little warmer, or you can just choose to leave it a neutral, full white. Doesn't matter. It's up to you, I mean. As for the placement of the key light, you need to make sure that so if we draw a line from our model to our camera, you need to make sure that it's between 30 and 60 degrees. So it's in this area, because otherwise if you move it too close to your camera, it will become flat. We try it. Here I will set my origin to the 3D cursor, and then if I rotate it, you'll see you always want to avoid this, to have your key light facing the same direction as your camera. This will make your scene look flat, and it's not advisable. So try to keep it in between these two bounds. If you put it here at around 90 degrees, it starts becoming more of a rim light. So yeah, place it here, ideally. This also allows us to draw a certain shadow silhouette of our model, as you can see here. And later on we're going to use our fill light to brighten up these shadows a little bit. But having these shadows in the scene already makes the presentation of your prop a lot better than having a flat lighting. The second light is the fill light, and the goal of this light is just to remove the shadows from your object. So we don't want to have pixels that are 100% black, so we use a fill light to lift up these shadows a little bit. And you also try to make it big in terms of size in order to have softer shadows. It is usually placed on the opposite side of your main light in regards to your camera. So these two angles are roughly the same. Finally, the rim light. The goal of this light is to separate the object from the background by having a sort of a light silhouette around your object. There is no specific rules. It's usually, it has an intensity that's lower than the main key light, but sometimes it can be it can have a higher power if you want the silhouette to be more pronounced. And also don't be afraid to play with the spread for this light, because sometimes you don't want the light to hit the ground. But I assume this is going to be way easier starting from Blender 4.0, since we're gonna have light linking. As for the color of this light, you can try to go for white, like the key light if you want, or you can choose a cooler color, so something that's going a little bit towards blue. In Blender there's an add-on tree light in. So if you enable it, you can select an object to choose as your target. And then when you go to lights, you're going to have this option, 3-point lights. Then you're going to have to choose 3D cursor as your pivot center. Then you select the tree lights, and then you can scale. So maybe you can use this as a base, start then changing the power and then moving your lights. But I usually like to do it from scratch. It doesn't take much time. The second method, which in my opinion is easier to implement, is using an HDRI with a twist. But not just any HDRI. You're gonna have to choose one from HDRI Haven, but you're going to have to choose the studio ones. So we have multiple ones, I think from 1 to 7. The purpose of choosing these HDRIs is that the light here is directional. So we have a source light over here, we have a softbox here, but everything in between, as you can see, these I don't know what they're called. I'm not a photographer, so if someone knows, you can tell me. I think these curtains here allow for the light to not reflect, to be dispersed in between the curtains, I think. So we really control the directionality of light. That's why they have this sort of texture, I guess. So this is the goal of this of choosing this HDRI, is that we can control the direction of the light by playing with the rotation. So here in Blender, I chose the one I showed you, Studio Small 03, and I have this rotation 2.4. You can see that the light is coming from this side, based on the shadows. You can obviously, depending on the HDRI you chose, you can change the rotation until you find something, until you find the direction that you're satisfied with. You might want to light, for instance, your prop from the left side. In that case, you'll rotate it the other way. But in my case, I chose this value because I will also be adding what I call a gobo plane. So if I enable my collection here, I have this called the gobo plane. We switch to rendered view. You can see it's a simple plane with holes in it, and the way we achieve this is using a Voronoi texture with a color ramp. We squeeze the black and white values to make the holes more pronounced, and then we switch it to 4D so we can play with the W factor without impacting the scale of. You can obviously also change the scale until you find something you're satisfied with. So yeah, with this we create sort of a gobo, and I personally think it looks better than the 3-point lighting setup, in my opinion, because it makes the scene a lot more dynamic. And you can even, like, by playing with the W factor, you can choose exactly where you want your shadow patches to fall on your model. So you can maybe, if you have a certain detail in some place that you want to highlight a lot more than other places, you can do that. I think it's a good way to achieve this. Finally, when you're showing your prop, it's good to have it's good to render multiple angles of your model. So for instance, you could add another camera, and then you might need to zoom in on a specific part of your model to show it a lot more. And here for this camera, for instance, I used a high focal length, 120 millimeters, whereas for the other one it was 85. So usually I like to zoom in by changing the focal length. And here you can also play with the depth of field. So with the depth of field checked, I have my focus. I have my focus empty, that is set in my focus object here, so I can control the f-stop. I have a depth of field, which adds a little bit of realism, I guess, to your model or your shot. That's it for me. I hope you learned something. Have a great day.